C'est l'heure de la première table ronde. Les défis face à nous sont considérables. Lutte contre le chômage, désendettement, prolifération des armes à feu, éducation, santé, besoin d'encadrement, développement, intelligence artificielle, violence, injustice sociale. La liste est trop longue. J'appelle pour mener ce débat Juliette Méadel, l'ancienne secrétaire d'État chargée de l'aide aux victimes, à la tête aujourd'hui fondatrice de L'avenir n'attend pas. Juliette, rejoignez-moi. Alors, les invités de Juliette Méadel qui va mener le débat à ma place, tant mieux, c'est Romina Boarini, conseillère et coordinatrice de l'initiative pour une croissance inclusive à l'OCDE, Jean-Louis Chaussade, le directeur général de SUEZ, Axel Dauchez, fondateur, directeur général make.org, Fadi Ghandour, président et directeur exécutif du groupe Wamda, Alexandre Mars, président et fondateur de la Fondation EPIC, et Jean Todt, le président de la Fédération internationale de l'automobile. À vous, Juliette, bon débat, bonne chance, c'est parti.
Merci Jean-François, cher Jacques Attali, cher Richard Attias, merci pour cette invitation à contribuer et à nous engager dans cette révolution positive. Alors la France, au fond, c'est le pays où on aime bien la révolution. Nous avions élu un président de la République qui avait dit « le changement, c'est maintenant ». Notre président actuel a écrit son fameux livre qui s'appelle « Révolution ». Et donc, il est tout naturel qu'aujourd'hui, 3 mois après cette élection présidentielle, nous soyons tous réunis ici pour pousser cette révolution que nous voulons positive. Et que nous voulons positive parce qu'après tout, la révolution, ça n'est pas forcément du cri et des larmes. Ça peut aussi être une révolution heureuse. Ça peut aussi être une révolution utile. Et toute la question qui nous est posée aujourd'hui, c'est que cette révolution heureuse et utile devient urgente. Et c'est cette urgence qui nous conduit à réfléchir maintenant à comment accélérer la révolution positive. Autrement dit, nous n'avons plus le choix. Alors je l'ai vécu de l'intérieur quand j'étais secrétaire d'État auprès du Premier ministre, où je m'occupais d'un sujet pas très heureux, puisqu'il s'agissait des victimes de terrorisme, d'accidents collectifs, de catastrophes naturelles. Et au fond, je me suis aperçue que, y compris dans ces situations tragiques, le politique peut faire plein de choses. Et on peut reconstruire l'envie de vivre. Quand vous êtes face à des personnes qui ont tout perdu, l'action publique peut aider. Seulement, je n'étais pas seule, et heureusement, et j'ai engagé ce travail avec les associations, les personnalités de la société civile, les acteurs, les victimes elles-mêmes, autrement dit.
So in civil society, and politicians can no longer act alone. And in my mind, that's the best way to get some unpopular decisions be accepted. It's working together. It's making decisions with those people who are impacted by these decisions, because that's also a way to have them take on board part of the responsibilities in the decision-making process. So in this roundtable, we're going to work together with various speakers around me, and each of them is going to tell us what they think this positive revolution is about, and they will tell us how they think we can speed it up. As for me, I will share with you some ideas. I believe that positive revolution needs to be a democratic revolution to begin with, and it's based on 2 things. First, our ability to make the right decisions, and right decisions are decisions which are made at the right time. In anticipation, these are decisions that need to be made taking the long term into account. Second, a good decision is a decision which is shared, so politicians need to accept and share power, which is what we're doing here, because each and every one of you is involved in positive revolution, and for it to work, we as politicians need to share power. So we need and encourage horizontal dialogue. We need to be humble and believe that together we're more useful than alone, and realize that sharing power is something that we need to learn, and that requires a lot of modesty. And last but not least, I think the right decision in a global world is a decision which is shared at global level. It's a multilateral decision. So without further ado, over to Romina Boarini. She is an advisor working with the General Secretary of OECD, and after the subprime crisis, she worked on multilateralism, and she will tell you how this can help cope with a crisis and therefore contribute to this positive revolution. Hello, good afternoon. Let me start by repeating what Juliette said when she talked about sharing power, because for us at OECD, it's all about inclusive growth. And when Mrs. Mayer talked about inclusive growth, she made my job easier. But for us, this inclusive growth means sharing power and giving any citizen the ability to grow, to be part of this growth, but also to profit, to benefit from this growth. OECD is an international organization. We work with all countries and all stakeholders in favor of global governance. And what we focus on is this idea that in an interdependent world, humankind can only progress if we go through multilateral solutions. One example, after emergency decisions were made following the financial crisis, which then became an economic crisis and then a political crisis. So the OECD decided to put in place a multilateral initiative to fight against tax optimization practices. And I think you've all heard about this initiative. It's called BEPS. And it's to fight against the erosion of taxes paid, because countries and jurisdictions don't always have the same regulations and the same tax standards, so profits can be maximized. But it also means that for states, they're losing on significant tax income, which could be used and invested in positive growth. So OECD started to grow, to bring together a large number of countries, not just OECD countries, but also partner countries. More than 100 signed the convention. So we brought them round a table and they signed a convention which is the same for everyone. The idea being to promote global standards and to achieve standard convergence. All this has been signed, and we're now in a process that could lead to a recovery of very significant tax income. We're talking about between 100 and 240 billion dollars, which are lost by states just because of these tax optimization practices. But this money can be recovered and can then be invested. So concretely, in inclusive growth, we come up with recommendations and suggestions that we make to our member countries. And one of the actions on the action plan is the idea of education. And I'm coming back to what Bruno Le Maire was saying earlier on when he talked about education. And yes, OECD is very much in line with this proposal. And we insist on education, not just primary school. Primary school, it's already too late. And it's even in kindergarten. All studies show that it's at a very young age that things happen, because that's when individuals develop their potential for success and develop their potential of inclusive growth. So it's in kindergarten that we need to take action, and we need to take action with new methods. What we are promoting are not just traditional educational policies, but we also want to include soft skills in these, or emotional skills in these traditional educational values. And this needs to be acquired before the age of 3. And it needs to be very targeted, because these soft skills are not encouraged in certain social categories, so we need to be very focused. Thank you, Mina, for this very short yet very relevant presentation. In addition to your approach, which is a multilateral approach, focusing on inclusive growth, I'd like to talk to you, Mr. Chaussade, you CEO of SUEZ, and SUEZ is a major player in France for water and waste management. You are working on circular economy, and you are part of the France-China working group. How do you manage and stimulate positive revolution in your daily activities? Well, in our company, positive revolution has two sides. The first side is that of resources. We call it the revolution of resources. Imagine the world tomorrow with 10 billion inhabitants. We won't be able to continue using as much resources as we do at the moment, whether it be water, minerals, food resources. So we need to learn to live differently. So in this economy of resources, we have the concept of circularity and this ability we have to better protect our resources, use less resource to provide the same service, or make resources last more than they do today. And it's also about reusing or recycling products. But more generally speaking, this way of doing things is going to operate a total revolution in the way companies do things. So we'll have to change the way we work, but we'll have to identify new values for corporations. Corporations exist to make profits, but not just that. And in positive revolution, that of tomorrow's resources, it will be very important to try and share knowledge, share technologies, share the environmental parts of our companies and help other companies improve their environmental footprint. We will also have to work with society and get all inhabitants involved in these changes and evolutions. I think that's the positive revolution a company like mine, like SUEZ, needs to be involved in. If we want to speed up the momentum for this revolution, there are two major pillars. The first one is sharing. I think no one can do things alone today. Whether it be in terms of relationships between SMEs and large corporations, whether it be relationships between large corporations, no one will be able to manage the entirety of services that need to be provided to humankind. And then we need to talk about technological revolutions. We need those technological revolutions so that we can achieve this carbon balance objective that we are targeting for 2050. Okay, so sharing of resources, sharing of power. That's probably the key word in positive revolution. Axel Dauchez, you founded Make.org. Tell us how you want to change politics. Well, I believe that positive revolution won't come from the top. In positive revolution, you have the word revolution. And it's too high a step. And public authorities have a constant weakness. Positive revolution means a revolution that's going to bring on board people's commitment. It does not just result from its ambition, but a positive revolution is the revolution of everyone for everyone. So if we want to move forward, this momentum needs to come from civil society. Civil society as the major stakeholder and actor of our own transformation. That's why I set up Make.org. Make.org is a platform that aims at setting up concrete actions with all stakeholders in civil societies, entrepreneurs, companies, citizens. And in November, for instance, we are launching an operation against violence to women in France, Italy, and in the UK. And we'll have employees from many companies, and we'll set up 10 major actions. And these won't be political actions. These will be actions decided by civil society aiming at addressing the problem. Likewise, with Intermarché, we worked on cutting down food waste. And we are working with JP Morgan and Manpower and SNCF. We're going to work on reinventing work, and each time tens and thousands of citizens are cooperating and identifying actions that we're then leveraging. How can we speed up revolution? How can we change the stage? Well, first, let's talk about citizens. When you ask a question to people and ask them if they're willing to be involved in collective actions, in the past we had 50% of them, and in 2017, just before the presidential election in France, it moved to 72%. So that's because I think citizens start to fear that society is no longer going to be what it used to be, and social cohesion is so much challenged that people are regaining interest. So we reached a tipping point. It's also true that companies have initiated actions to become more corporate citizens, and now they're trying to answer to the question, what is the role of a corporation in society? And if a company is not capable of answering this question, its employees can't answer the question, and the company is no longer included in sustainable societies. So speeding up positive revolution means accepting our share of responsibility. And what I can tell you is that this is a transnational movement which was initiated, and revolution will come from civil society.
So it's a starting point. It's what drives us. And I think we should now listen to Jean Todt. Everyone knows, all motorsports fans know who this person is. He's the president of the IAF, International Automobile Federation, working on road safety. Another issue of common interest, road safety. How is this major cause? How has this major cause become something that has saved lives? First of all, unfortunately, it's a cause that costs a great many lives. We're in France. France is one of the better students because in 1972, Jacques Chaban-Delmas, who was the prime minister, decided that it was no longer possible to have so many road accidents. There were 16,000 dead every year on the roads, and something had to be done about it. 45 years later, 16,500 dead. There are 3,300 now, with 3 times more cars than there were at the time, which means that when there is a desire at the highest level for things to change, well, they will. Unfortunately, 90% of accidents take place in developing countries. There are 1.3 million dead on the roads, 50 million injured. It's the #1 cause of mortality for young people, age 14 to 29. Every day, 3,500 people die. And therefore, we need governments to make a commitment to that. And as a special envoy of the Secretary General of the UN, this is one of my roles. Things are changing. Road safety is one of the objectives of sustainable development that are key. We're working with the UN to create a global fund in favor of road safety. We're working with car manufacturers to implement systems, minimum safety systems that are adapted in every country, because unfortunately between a car that is sold in France and a car that is sold in Africa, they look the same, but the security features are much less developed in Africa. So this is a fantastic opportunity for me to discuss these issues so that all of us, all together, can make a commitment to fight what is, in truth, a pandemic in countries, and including developing countries. Thank you. So we can really see through your testimonial that public bodies, public institutions today, you've worked with the UN and the OECD and Civic Tech and SUEZ. We can see how you are driving forces. I would now like to turn towards two stakeholders from the private sector. Fadi Ghandour, an investor, but also the founder of a business called Runway Development, where you help for the social inclusion of communities. Tell us what the positive revolution is in your view. How do you select these projects of general interest, and how can things be sped up?
English speaker, so excuse my English, ladies and gentlemen, as you say in French. I'm taking you back to the Middle East, maybe a little bit a challenged area and an area of great opportunity. So my view of where the revolution is, and it's a global story at the end of the day, the revolution starts by, I think, there's a big responsibility with the private sector. The private sector, as you had defined earlier, needs to define itself. Where does it stand within society? What is its role in society? Is it only focusing on profit maximization, or is it going to be thinking about its impact in general? And as we know from the financial crisis in 2008, that private sector actually does affect society in a major manner. So how do we actually move from that negative view of what the private sector is, and how do we go into becoming a positive force for society and thinking of ourselves in the private sector, in the entrepreneurial world, that we are a positive force, that we will want to be a positive force in society in view of the massive challenges that we have and in view of the capabilities that the private sector has. I don't think anyone outside of government has the power and the knowledge and the skills and the access that the private sector has. And I don't know anyone that has all this power that uses this less to the betterment of society. So there is a huge, huge gap on what we are in terms of our power and what we do in terms of how we impact society. So how do we do that? And the way I've been working with it over the years in the Middle East is saying we are best at being entrepreneurial. So how do we build ecosystems for entrepreneurship so that we can help the youth that are graduating from our universities to become job creators, to become productive in society, so that the political element that scares us all in radicalism becomes, moves into productive elements rather than thinking of what do we do with our youth. What's called the youth bulge. No, it's not the youth bulge, it's the youth opportunity. And I think the private sector is a major player in doing that, moving away from the concept of CSR and its PR-ish view and thinking more of activism. And I think activism moves, if you will allow me, into something that I would call corporate entrepreneurship responsibility. It's the responsibility of corporations in fostering entrepreneurship. And that takes 5 or 6 elements in partnership with public sector and civil society. One, and I'll go very quickly with it, one is access to capital, access to finance. The other one is access to knowledge and skills. The third one is access to mentors, and the private sector has the capability of mentoring all these young and youth to move into the private sector. And then access to markets. You know, if you want to scale businesses and you are regressing into a productive markets, protective countries, not wanting to trade globally, then you're not going to have companies that are going to scale. So you need markets, you need open markets, and you need to allow people to actually move. And then access to talent. Small companies do not have access to talent because big companies actually takes this talent. And finally, you need to have the regulatory environment the ease of doing business, of how do I enter the market, how do I enter it easily, and how do I exit it easily without being penalized if I am not doing well or if I'm failing. And that is a big issue, the law of bankruptcy. In my part of the world, if you go bankrupt, you go to jail. That means you are not going to be entrepreneurial.
Thanks a lot. Et pour compléter...
And in conclusion of this first part of the roundtable, I'll yield the floor to Alexandre Mars, founder of EPIC, in which you've invested your own money. It's a foundation for childhood. How does this foundation act? Thank you very much. In fact, if we're talking about positive revolution, we need to understand that we're not so far from a true revolution. In 2025, half of the jobs that exist today will no longer exist. So we hope the positive revolution will go well, otherwise all of us will be in big trouble. The revolution cannot only be led by religion, by the state. Axel was saying this. It is up to us in civil society to get to work. I'm proud of my country, of France. I'm proud of paid holidays, of all of the benefits that we've had. We need to be proud of this. But tomorrow's world cannot be binary. It's not a world that is economically liberal on the one hand, or social on the other hand. We need to understand that, yes, of course, success needs to be fostered. Those who have kids in this room, I'm sure you want your kids to be successful, but not successful merely by his bank balance, his bank account balance. The achievement and success is social disruption. You know the millennials, 18, 20, 25 years old, who, like you, are recruiting young people. It's increasingly complicated to keep them, to recruit them, because they no longer accept that people like Apple make profits of 60 billion and refuse to pay tax in France, and not just in France. Who accepts that? Are there still people in this room who accept this? I certainly hope not. Because at the same time, there are millions and millions of people who are suffering. That is the meaning of positive revolution. It's understanding that you can do both. And increasingly, citizens are embracing this. Axel was saying so. There are three typologies of leaders, business leaders. The first is the activists of the social good. Those who say even if it has detrimental effects on the bottom line or the P&L, will get down to it. And on the other side of the spectrum, there are those you'll never invite to dinner, those who don't give a damn, the Uncle Scrooges of this world, those who say that more is not enough and that sharing is rubbish. Most of us are pragmatists, and that is the big change. Why are we changing? Because we understand that it's better. Better for who? Better for our employees, better for our customers, and better for our own families. And there are solutions in this world. EPIC provides solutions. We're a non-profit. We don't make any money from it, but our single purpose is for giving to become the norm, that giving something becomes normal. The Americans say, we have our billionaires. I live in the US and I love the country. People say, I give 50% of what I earn. Who is going to give 50% of what they own here in this room? We have people who say, how much am I supposed to give? We say, what is your pain threshold when giving to charity? I don't know, 1%, 10%, 0.1%? Don't judge that. Don't make giving to charity painful, ever. The world is changing. If you want to continue, if you want to be the next Nokia or the next BlackBerry, you'll need to understand things if you don't want, because you'll find it difficult to recruit young people. Just an example. Anyone can do this. Everyone gets a paycheck. On the pay slip, it's not .00, it's .23 cents or .56 cents. Companies increasingly are going to say, you can give the cents to charity. Totally optional and totally painless. De Richebourg, Dior, and others are doing that, and it makes sense. And we need to find meaning in all of these businesses. But unfortunately, we don't have much time before we need to close. I wanted to give all 6 of you to discuss one key issue, that of giving and sharing. We saw that for politicians, it's sharing power, sharing resources, sharing money, because that's also, you need to call things by their name, money. It's also sharing data, as is the case for make.org. Is sharing something that makes you poor, or is the positive revolution not a new way of being generous, or just saying that sharing is something which increases society's cohesiveness and the fate of future generations? I'm sorry to pick up on this, but let's talk about 2024. We're talking about sharing, for sharing, come for sharing. Sharing is really one of the crucial points of our candidacy, our application to host the Olympics in 2024. We talked about gender equality, and here it's the first time that an application to organize the Olympic Games was based purely on sharing. The Olympics are a global event and can also encourage sharing in the community. Just to comment about sharing, about commitments. There are 2 great virtues to this. There's a functional virtue, there's redistribution. You improve your own life, you improve the life of others, and that's everything we've already discussed. But there's something even more powerful. We are giving added meaning to what we do, either as a company or as a private individual. When you start working out, you start to feel better very quickly. And I think today's meeting is kind of a group therapy and should do us good. So I think in conclusion, I would like to pick up on what Juliette said when he opened about how you need to face the emergency, social, economic emergency. It needs to drive us to act, each of us individually. But a note of hope, I think that the democratic revolution must take place in France. I will never accept that the National Front can be in the second round of the presidential election. And I think all of this is in our hands. We need to restore confidence in public action, in political action. And I think the trust, the confidence can be restored, and it works well. And the 6 examples we have around this table show that when you have the will, you can make meaning and be efficient for future generations. Thank you.